Warm Showers has been great. It's you get a chance to, not only meet new people, whether you're touring yourself or hosting, and have great conversations, share experiences. You're participating in cultures from all over the world at times, sitting down and sharing a meal. I get to show my magic tricks. One of the things I looked forward to the most was on my trip was taking a shower at the end of the day. I think next time I might see about going a couple, 3 days without, see how that goes. Depends on what I'm eating too. But I did find when I drank from so many of those soda fountains in the convenience stores, so much soda, I didn't lose weight for a while, and I smelled really strong. But when I quit doing that, I could easily go for a couple of days without a shower. So, but it's and a place to do laundry now and then. You don't want to take advantage of people, but it's nice when they offer. I'm Greg Guardiano. I live in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. I started using Warm Showers about 6 years ago on my first bicycle trip, and I've been hosting people ever since. Fortunately, the friend who got me interested in touring said over and over and over, every ounce counts. And he told me that on his tour, actually, his wife told me that on his tour, that he ended up sending half of his stuff back home on the second day of his trip. I knew to travel lightly. I did a lot of research online. I found a trailer was the first thing I was going to ditch. I was not going to ride with a trailer. I met a park ranger years ago who worked at the base of the Appalachian Trail in Georgia, and he said they picked up thousands and thousands of cans of food that people left within the first few miles of their trip. So I knew not to bring a lot of canned foods. I did bring some duplicate tools, a couple of ground cloths for my tent, an extra tarp or two. So about a month into it, I sent all of those back along with the maps of places I'd already been. But the rest of the trip, I felt like it'll only make me stronger if I have a little bit extra weight. I also brought way too many shirts. I think I probably at least 7 shirts because I figured maybe I'd do laundry once a week. But you really don't need that. The one thing, though, that I did bring and only used twice was a folding chair that weighed about 1.5 pounds. And I will definitely bring that the next trip, too. Even though I used it twice, it was so worth it to have that folding chair. The most interesting, there were a few interesting places. Probably the first one was this old church in West Virginia. It had great big rooms. It had high ceilings. The rooms were probably the priest's rooms once upon a time. And being a church, there was this feeling of warmth and security, comfort. But unless you've read The Monk by Gregory Lewis, and then between the still air and the creaky floors, the narrow winding hallways, the settling sounds of the building. And even it was a breezy night, and there were these banshee-like sounds of the wind coming through the windows. So it also gave this kind of an eerie feeling. But in the end, the host was great. The bed was comfortable. The shower was warm. It was a great place to stay. Another one was in Bazine, Kansas. So this couple, that was one of my favorites because this couple had bought the old public high school, and they had a bunch of kids there that they had adopted. And I think some of these kids came from rough areas. I remember a couple of them were from Ukraine. And the younger ones were just living an adventure. They all just seemed very happy. They seemed like they were experiencing something they hadn't before. So that was really nice. And there were probably about 10 of us sitting around this great big table in the kitchen, and they made us a wonderful dinner. And then I'm a magician, so I always like to carry a couple of tricks. And of course, I lug this 5-pound box of magic tricks across the country with me. So I broke those out, and we spent probably the next couple of hours doing this. There was one teenage girl from Ukraine who was just blown away by everything. But it was fun. I just had a blast doing it. And then a third one was in Ordway, Colorado. There's this woman from New Zealand who used to be a prison guard. And she loved to complain about all these bicyclists that come through that she puts up with and hosts, but she loves it. She actually had a couple of trailers that she had put a lot of bunks in. She had set up a nice little deck between them. She was she was working on putting a bathroom for just the bicyclists, and she had a couple of stalls in there, and she was still working on the shower. It's probably long been done now. So she has this ranch. She raises goats and I think chickens, and probably grows a lot of food and everything. So for all her mumbling and grumbling about all these terrible bicyclists that came through, she came and sat out there outside with us, and there were probably about 10 people that night. She sat out there with us for a couple of hours and enjoyed the conversation. She laughed the whole time. And she said she hosts quite a few people. I don't remember if she said 50 or 150 people per year. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's more than that. But she was a wonderful host. So I think the first best experience, it may have been the first one, was pulling into, if I recall correctly, it was Girard, Kansas. And the guy that I was riding with, who I met in southern Colorado, he and I stopped at the post office where we had mailed a couple of things. And while we were opening our boxes, a woman walked in. She saw our bikes, our fully loaded bikes outside, and started asking some questions. And we asked her if there was a place to stay, because it turned out the bicycle hostel that had been there had become a private residence. So she suggested going down to the fire station, that they have a great big field out there. And she continued talking with us for a while. And a few minutes later, she goes, "Oh, they also have a shower inside. You might ask the chief there." And then a few minutes after that, she says, "Oh, by the way, my husband's the fire chief." So we get over there. The door flies open as I'm reaching for it. And we went in and we sat at the fire chief's desk, and he spent about 15 minutes talking with us. And at the end of that, he said, "Well, my wife and I would like to invite you to our home this evening." So we accepted that. And on our way out, the friend that I was riding with, Alan, said, "That was an interview, right?" So it sure was. So we went to their house. He gave us directions, and they made a fantastic dinner. The next morning, his wife made fresh baked bread, huge, wonderful breakfast. Alan and I each had our own rooms. We had showers. And then he is an avid bicyclist also. So he was preparing or training for the RAGBRAI, and he wanted to do a long ride. So he just rode with us, and we wanted to go to a bike shop, and he knew of one. And I think the next town over where it was Pittsburgh, maybe 40, 50 miles away. So he rode with us out to that, showed us where the bike shop was. So that was such a good experience. I think that's what got me into it. And then since then, I've had I've hosted quite a few people. I think this year I just had the first couple a couple of nights ago. I've got another couple coming tonight. Last year, I think I had about 15 or more. The year before that, I think we were about 25. The year before that, at least a dozen. And they've just all been great experiences. So I'll continue to do it. I love it. And it inspires me. A lot of times I'll go ride with them in the morning. So it gets me off my butt and gets me a good ride. And then it keeps reminding me that I need to get back on the road myself and do another tour. So. I grew up all over the world, mostly in Africa and Asia. And then I joined the Navy to see the world, of course. But I got to see Europe, so that was great. And then I became an engineer, I became a consultant, and I traveled all over the world. I worked in Malaysia, Korea, London, Paris, Brazil, Argentina, went to Sri Lanka and South Africa. And every place I went, I met people with all kinds of different backgrounds, and I just love that. So doing touring on a bicycle, you end up meeting a lot of people from different cultures. I've met people that I mentioned a minute ago that the first couple this year, he is French, and the couple showing up tonight is a French couple. And I speak French, so that's great for me to be able to practice a little bit. But you meet people from all over the world. It's great. On my trip, I met people all across the country, and during a time where people were a little bit soured on a lot of the politics and some of the stuff that's going on, it really renewed your faith in people. So that was great. So swapping cycling stories is always motivating to me. I'm a bit of a foodie, so I do enjoy cooking. And if I have the time and inclination, I guess, if I have the time anyway, let's put it that way, I'll cook up something. 2 years ago, I had a group of MIT students, about 6 or 7 of them come through. So I grilled up a bunch of stuff and we sat around the table. I did magic tricks again there. That's great when you got a bunch of engineering and math students who are just as nerdy as I am because I have engineering and math degrees. Similar tastes, and we had a lot of fun. I had a German couple come through a few years ago. I had just made some peach jam, and it was a little tart for my taste, but they loved it. They just absolutely loved it. So I gave them a jar. They were so appreciative of taking this big jar of peach jam on the road with them. Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, you just meet people from everywhere. You get to enjoy sitting over a meal with people is just a great experience all over the world. Always has been. I have not kept in touch with anybody I've hosted, but the guy that I wrote, so when I first went on my trip, I got down to Salida and met somebody from Santa Rosa, California, who was heading to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania for his 50th high school reunion. And somewhere in Utah, a woman had joined him. And they ended up, and I rode with them for quite a while. She went back home after a couple of weeks and then came back onto the trip later on. But they ended up becoming a couple and are still together today. And we visited each other. We talked to each other on the phone all the time. They've become some of my favorite people in life. And I think we've become lifelong friends. Plan it out as far in advance as possible. When I did my trip, a lot of times it was the night before, or even the morning of, and I often didn't get any answers at all. So if you can give somebody several days notice, that's always best. Also, I get so much email. I've missed some. I feel terrible when I get a request from somebody and I don't mean to ignore it, which is the impression that I got when I was touring, but sometimes they just slip through. So if you get a few days, at least a week or two, even better. And that way, if the person doesn't respond, you can always reach out again. So, and that has worked well for some of the visitors that I've had. I always carry a jar of peanut butter with me, usually a little bit of trail mix, maybe 1 or 2 protein bars. So the guy that I rode with for over half of my trip across the country is like 6'7", and he's a huge eater. So we would go to all these diners like Denny's or Bob Evans, Bob's Big Boy, maybe whatever those are. Some of them have buffets. He would order 2 meals, almost always order 2 meals, or make several trips to the buffet. And I tried to do that a couple of times, and all that did was make me want to find a quiet, shady spot and just sit for the rest of the day. So I discovered, for me, the best thing that I could do was eat an apple and a spoon of peanut butter, and that kept me going all morning long. As far as when food availability is limited, I mean, I always had that peanut butter. I might have had a couple bags of instant oatmeal, so you just add hot water, very easy. A couple of protein bars, that was usually enough to keep me going. You always want to take a lot of water. So I always had the 2 water bottles, usually an extra liter or 2 of water. And, a lot of parks, when you're camping at parks, a lot of parks have grills. So instead of taking a lot of Hamburger helper, you can pick up a steak. You can grill yourself up a feast in some of these parks. And it's if there's a grocery store nearby. But